Louisville. We're joined now by Tom Hauser. He's in our New York studio, and he is the official biographer of Muhammad Ali. So, Tom, this day is it turning out exactly as Muhammad Ali planned it so very carefully?
I don't think anybody can say exactly how it was planned, exactly how it will turn out. What I would note from my perspective is that the truest tribute to Muhammad is not in the massive number of celebrities and other members of the elite who are turning out for this and speaking out all over the world. It's in the hundreds of millions of common men and women who are celebrating Muhammad Ali's life this week. And also, when we look back on some of the great periods of mourning and celebrations over the years, whether it was for John Kennedy decades ago, John Lennon, Princess Diana, other memorials that have captivated the world, the passing of Muhammad Ali reminds us that death at the end can be a natural part of life. This was not a life that was cut short. It was a full life, well lived.
And do you see his greatest legacy as being outside the ring or inside it?
Absolutely, his greatest legacy was outside the ring. Muhammad was arguably the greatest fighter of all time, and he certainly was very proud of that part of his legacy, but that's not why we're here today. Muhammad's legacy will be that he was a beacon of hope for oppressed people all over the world. When he refused induction into the United States Army during the height of the war in Vietnam, he stood up for the proposition that unless you have a very good reason for killing people, war is wrong. And it might be that his greatest legacy is that there was an aura of pure goodwill and love about him. He taught a lot of people how to love.
You're his official biographer. What was it like working with him on that biography?
Well, that goes way back in time to the period 1988 to 1990, and it was wonderful. I don't think I'll ever have a professional endeavor that brings me as much joy as that one did. I was privileged to spend an enormous amount of time with Muhammad, his family, his friends. And in addition to that, obviously, I did a lot of archival research. I interviewed more than 200 people. And really, I feel honored to have been able to write a page of Muhammad Ali's history.
And can you describe him to us? What was he like as a man, for those of us who just know him through the TV screen?
The two things that impressed me most about Muhammad when I was with him were, one, how deeply spiritual he was. There was a time in his life when he was younger when he very often fit his religion to what he wanted to do. But later in life, he conformed his conduct to the teachings of his religion. At the end of each day, he would ask himself, if God were to judge me based just on what I did today, would I go to heaven or hell? He really lived his life in accord with that. And the other thing is what a genuinely nice man Muhammad was. He really was a very sweet person. It's hard for me to imagine Muhammad being rude or unfriendly to any one of the thousands, literally thousands of people who approached him each day when he was out in public, who wanted a hug or a kiss or an autograph or a picture. He wanted to make every last person he met happy. Every time he signed an autograph, and he probably signed more autographs than anybody who ever lived, and I mean that seriously, because he was signing autographs from the age of 18 until the end. But he'd always say, after signing for hours on end on the street in a restaurant, he'd say, it just takes a couple of seconds for me to scribble my name, and that person will remember it and look at the autograph and be happy for the rest of his or her life.
Did you talk to him about that period when he was banned from boxing because he had fought against being drafted into the US Army for Vietnam? I mean, those were his prime years when he was out of the ring. How did he feel about that?
Muhammad lost what might have been the 3.5 best years of his ring career because he refused induction into the United States Army. And not having those years is, I guess, a little bit like knowing that there was a symphony that Beethoven wrote that we've never heard. But what Muhammad said to me often about that time was, people talk about how I sacrificed for my principles, but there were young men who thought the war in Vietnam was correct. They thought it was just and proper. They went into the United States military. They were sent to Vietnam. They were killed. And those young men made a much greater sacrifice than I did.
And how great was his achievement, if you can put it in context, given that he was growing up here in segregated Louisville before black people in America had legal civil rights? The fact that he rose and became this champion Olympic boxer, just how hard was that for someone to do back then?
You know, I've heard a lot this week in particular about the injustices in the United States and the war the United States waged. And war and injustice are intractable, age-old problems. They've been here ever since civilization began, and unfortunately they'll probably be here until civilization ends. What we can say about Muhammad is that he was one of many, many people over the millennia who fought those injustices, who fought the idea of war. And to the extent that he moved the needle a little bit, to the extent that his spirit is in all of us, and it really has reached very deeply into the psyche of the world, then we should be thankful for him. This is a time of mourning, but it should also be a time of celebration, and it would be a good time for people all over the world to reflect on what he tried to teach us and not just pay lip service to it, but to follow his example. It's ironic, really, that somebody who was a warrior should become a prophet of peace and love. But that's who Muhammad Ali was, and that's how we should remember him.
Tom Hauser, Muhammad Ali's official biographer there in our New York studio. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching BBC News on the day that Muhammad Ali makes his final journey. His casket is processing through the streets of Louisville. He'll be buried in a private ceremony, and then this afternoon a very public memorial service that he planned so very carefully.